sounds like ears in the car. And I'm like, yeah, good. I can't hear you. I'll call you when I get back to Nashville. I can't, what? It was terrible. It was the worst experience. I think I had the radio on max to try to outdo the air noise, but that didn't work either. It just made my ears. I mean, I got back and I walked in the house. I'm like, hi, home.
In one meeting. I'm not yelling.
What happened to you? That's exactly what Sorry, I didn't mean that.
There's a couple that should, and they took home with them.
All right, Marty, you're walking back.
That's the White House.
When you were, we couldn't get the screens to do all three, so.
Nice. I was bouncing back between y'all.
All three.
Well, because it's not showing slides on that screen. So.
I was back as long as I could. It's still got you.
Right. Everybody's ready to go. I believe there's a quorum. Thanks to everybody for coming to the November 1st Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting. I believe we provided a hybrid option for those who aren't able to be here today in person. Online participants communicate in the chat if anybody's participating online. They may only be able to hear the presenters clearly, may not be able to due to the acoustics in this room. Somebody will attempt to type questions from the room into the chat since it's going to be hard to hear. We'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the previous meeting minutes, the September meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to endorse those minutes? Your second.
Second.
All right. Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor, please say aye. Opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is public comment. At this time, I'll open the floor to any member of the public who wishes to make a comment to the Transportation Coordinating Committee. You may also email comments to GNRC to comments@gnrc.org. Is there anybody in attendance that wishes to make a comment during this section? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to item 3, our action items. First one being to amend the Transportation Improvement Program. And I'll hand this over to Shay Northfield, GNRC TIP Coordinator, to discuss this item.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So as a reminder, the TIP is a 4-year program that's listing all regionally significant and federally funded programs within our MPO county region. It must be consistent with the Regional Transportation Plan and fiscally constrained, and our current TIP, which is 2023 to 2026, was adopted in November 2022 and accounts for approximately $1.7 billion. And you can access our TIP at gnrc.org/TIP. So as an overview, here are our current amendments. They are all in your packets. That is where our most up-to-date versions of these amendments are. We have 3 projects here that are related to the rescission of CRISA funds. So these are our last 3 amendments that are planned related to CRISA. So our first project that we have is that Advanced Transportation Controllers. This is to remove this project to combine this scope with Franklin's other project on today's agenda, which is the ITS technology project. So our second one is the ITS infrastructure. This is, again, adding that controllers from the first amendment to this project scope. And our third and final project related to CRISA today is through Mount Juliet. This is Mount Juliet Road ADA upgrades. This is going to be adding about $600,000 in federal USTBG funds from the active transportation program to replace the CRISA funds that were previously shifted. And finally, we have 2 TDOT projects. So the first one is the I-24 ramp improvements at South Church Street. And this is to add about $500 million in federal NHPP funds for 2024 construction phase, and also to correct the match to be 9010, which is federal state match. And finally, there is the TDOT Smart Corridor project. This is updating the name, the length of the project, and the scope of the project to be along State Route 1, which is Murfreesboro Road, and connector routes, and to update the design phase to 2024. So this project and then all these projects together are amendments and adding about $5 million to the TIP in total. Are there any questions?
I will give one comment on the ITS infrastructure project. It's not from Franklin. I talked to my engineer, traffic engineer yesterday, and there will be one edit to the funding on that. I'll also do that here quickly. I just found out about it myself yesterday, so it's about a 10% difference in what's shown here, up obviously, but I will send that to you. Okay, thank you.
Will that need to be a new TIP amendment?
Yeah,
Probably.
it'll be, we'll send you an updated version.
On that project, you're not shifting any, you're not adding any money to the ITS infrastructure from the ITS technology project, because it was 247,500. But on the other, it's just a change in the scope, so it's not increasing.
It is a change in scope to add the CRISA project to it, but it will also be, we'll be able to request to add some additional funding. It's about 10% over
Like what you.
than what's shown here. That's correct.
Thank you.
It's doing both. Yep.
Any additional questions? We have a motion.
Curious about the state project, US 231 and I-24. What specifically does that include? Ramp improvements, is that all ramps or is that just to say the eastbound exit and entrance ramps?
I think it's a couple of ramps as well as upgrading the lighting package in that area, the high mass lighting.
Couldn't tell by the description and specifically what was going to happen.
It's my understanding high mass lighting is included in that as well.
Okay,
Upgrade.
so looks like construction is 95%, 98% of the total project cost. Was there previous funds already taken care of to do the design or any right of way?
I know from perspective, this particular package was part of the Improve Act, one of the Improve Act projects. I'm not sure exactly how, the front end of that is. I don't even take the conversation.
No, probably more about it than I do. Thank you, Jim. Any additional questions? Any projects for staff? I think we have a motion on the floor from Tom. Do we have a second to approve? Second. Joe was second there. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Hearing none, that motion stands approved. Moving on to action item 3B, federal aid urban boundaries update. I will turn this over to Max Baker, GNRC Director of Research and Analytics, for the staff presentation.
All right, I think I can probably take it from here. Since the last time you guys have seen it, there have been a few modifications as a result of conversations that we've had with Tennessee Department of Transportation. The largest ones were in the Williamson County Sneed Road area that changed some of the, or actually reduced some of the urban area that aligns with the Harpeth River. And there was another section in Sumner County just north of Hendersonville that was increasing the urban boundary to align with a TVA line. So those are the big changes. There were some other minor modifications just to align it with either a roadway or a stream, just so that there's a natural boundary there. Encourage everybody to go to the website and take a look at it. I think Daniel, yep, next one. GNRC.org maps federal aid is where you can find that. We also did adjust some of the separation between the Nashville Davidson portion and the Murfreesboro portion as a result of a conversation with Mr. Kerr. And I believe that's all that's really changed. As it stands right now, these have been submitted to Tennessee Department of Transportation. And I believe, Stacy, you have sent them on to Federal Highway. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, Max. And the Federal Highway should complete their review here pretty quick, and that should be your final comments on that.
And then based on whatever those comments are, we'll make any modifications that might come out of that conversation and likely bring it back for this body, as well as the Tennessee or the Transportation Policy Board.
Yeah, and the goal is to come to consensus by the end of the year. You don't necessarily have to adopt it by the end of the year. So if we're still back and forth trying to get some things tweaked, as long as our goal is to get to a consensus by the end of the year, and then at your next available meeting, you would do a formal adoption.
So those have already been sent to Federal Highway, but I think, you know, what we're asking for today is to endorse the draft that is currently available on the website for Federal Highway's review and incorporating whatever comments they have as a result.
Hey, Max, following up on the conversation we had, I still would like to get a better understanding of the 840 defined line on our portion, because we do have, projects in our long range plan that are showing north of that.
Yeah, that's where the census defined urban area, federal aid urban boundary, and the definitions that those have to take, along with political lines of city limits or urban growth boundaries, just they don't line up. So the urbanized area that the census defined uses 840 as a breakpoint between the Nashville-Davidson urbanized area and the Murfreesboro urbanized area, even though the city of Murfreesboro goes north of 840. So you might have projects that are in the Nashville-Davidson urban area, therefore the federal aid urban boundary, because the federal aid urban boundary must encompass the entirety of the census defined urban area. That's a lot of urban area. Did everybody follow that?
Very good without stuttering there.
City of Fairview was cut out of that, right?
Their census defined urban area was removed as a result of the new definition of urban area.
Max, what did you do in the Couchville Pike area?
Couchville Pike, so in conversations with TDOT, they recommended everything west of 840 be rural. So like the Fall Creek area. That
You mean east of 840?
west. Jefferson Pike, that corridor was to remain urban on the south side of the lake.
Okay.
Then it hits 840 and goes north, and then kind of Couchville and the whole warehousing, the racetrack area, all of that would continue to be urban, but there's a tiny sliver between the Smyrna portion and that Wilson County line area that would be more rural than it would be urban, just because of the natural area that's there that won't be urbanized anytime soon, if ever.
Nitpicky, but for Sumner County, it's the second bullet point there, I think should be Deshay
That's
Creek.
my fault. It's a typo. I'll fix it.
I'm looking, when I was looking at the Lebanon area, there's lines and I can't quite tell. I think those are separation lines, but can you tell me what those are on the map between Lebanon and Nashville? There's like a.
Correct. Yeah. So that's where, because it's a small urban area, it has to have its own federal aid urban boundary. And that line was drawn where those two urban areas are next to each other. Kind of what Jim was just talking about.
We're still on our own.
You're still on your own. Correct. And that's something that I guess has been on the books all along, but was brought to our attention during this update, is that each urban area, large or small, has to have its own federal aid urban boundary encompassing it only.
So this looks a little bit different than what I've seen before, but that's, I mean, as long as that line's there, it makes sense to me. That's the main thing I would make sure.
Functionally, nothing will change from the way that we currently do business, but that line is now there to delineate the differences.
Yeah, if something changed, we'd definitely be concerned, so I just want to make sure that they say.
Any other questions for staff? Sounds like now that, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but there's, the recommended motion is to endorse this. If there's concerns or anything in the room, is there anything wrong with waiting a month to do this? Is this a super time sensitive thing that we have to have done right now? If folks are have concerns or things that need to be clarified, there's a
Well,
number of questions.
It's scheduled for adoption by the TPB on the 15th because that's our last meeting of the year. They won't meet in December. And I think the way I would think about it is similar to the RTP and the TIP. You adopt before Federal Highway has approved. And then if they have any, significant suggestions that might change what you have adopted, then we would bring it back. But as from what we know right now, that's very unlikely. And so I would treat it the same way I would any of those core products and probably recommend for endorsement since that's what the TPB will be voting on in this month. That makes sense.
I think so. So regardless of what the TCC does, it's going to the TPB.
Yes.
Motion in a second. I do think that this is one of the things that the bylaws, the stuff we're talking about with bylaws, if it goes, that this is one of my things that I've talked about some, but if it doesn't matter what this body does and it goes to the TPB anyway, I'm not totally clear on the role of the body.
At least know some of our concerns with
Right.
this.
Right.
Yeah, send us concerns that you might have with the boundary, but in terms of what Federal Highway, what comments they might have, they're not here today, but in terms of what comments they might have, it shouldn't change it significantly. They might just have suggestions. Am I describing that right?
That's what we understand right now, as of right now.
Ask a procedural question. Is it an issue if members of this committee discuss the proposed changes of boundaries that deal with our specific jurisdictions? Apart from our meeting here in this together as a group.
I guess, can you repeat that again?
Is there an issue or concern about discussing the change in boundaries with other members of the committee where we have a common interest in what I'm saying is that Josh, I might want to discuss with him the line as it pertains to Sumner County and or Gallatin or maybe Hendersonville. Because several of those changes are essentially between our two jurisdictions.
That does not bother us in any way.
Anybody else have any questions or concerns? Or I think we had a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of endorsing this federal aid urban boundary update and send it on to the TPB, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none. Okay, that motion stands as approved. Moving on, item number 4, informational items. IMA's annual listing of obligations for federal fiscal year 2023. I'll hand this over to Daniel Caparella, GNRC Transportation Plan.
All right, thank you, Chair. So many of you may remember this. We do this every year. At the end of each federal fiscal year, we are required to publish an annual listing of all projects that incurred obligations within 90 days at the end of that federal fiscal year. So October 1st was the start of fiscal year 2024. And in your packet, you'll see a full listing of all obligations within our NPO area in all of fiscal year 2023. So I'll give you a few highlights from from a summary standpoint, of what we've seen throughout the year. But I think the main point is for all of you to look through, this listing of obligations. Right now it's in draft form. We will end up having a report, but for now, I would encourage you to look at your projects, make sure that nothing is off. We've received a couple comments so far, which is helpful. So if you see maybe a tip ID that's incorrect, or a funding source is incorrect, or maybe amount of federal funds in any one of these lines in this report, let us know, and we will get it fixed. So this first, yes, Tom.
I've got something I'm trying to figure out if it's a duplicate. It's Wilson County, North Castle Heights Avenue. It's about 2/3 of the way down the first page. 127903 is the PIN number.
Okay, I see it.
And then on the second, third, fourth page, I think that's it. Hold on. Look for it again. I'm sorry.
Fourth one down.
Yeah. Fifth one down from the top. Is that a duplicate or
I'm not finding the second one.
it's 1, 2, 3, fourth page, fifth one down from the top.
Yeah, they're first separate phases.
Okay.
So you might see multiple phases on a single project that have obligations throughout the year. I would say that's probably a good thing. It means the project's moving forward.
Yes, that means, okay.
Helpful to see them sorted by county instead of authorization date too. Easier to find our projects.
We can send you,
Just to me.
yeah, we can send you your projects. I think for how it needs to be published, it needs to be in order of the date that it was authorized to show the full fiscal year. If that makes sense. All right, so the first chart we're looking at is federal highway obligations. So this does not include transit between the years 2010 and 2023. As you can see, it has a steady increase in amount obligated, and then a big spike in 2018. And then obviously in 2020, due to COVID, a big drop in obligations. And then we've sort of made our way back up to a more steady trend. These are federal transit obligations. The exact opposite here you'll see in the chart. So in 2020, big spike in obligations, I'm sure due to COVID relief funds that you all received to continue operating. And then back down in 2022 and a little bit up in 2023. Here are our suballocated funding obligations. It's a little bit more erratic, depending on how much funding we have obligated in each year. 2018 is a specific year. Sure, Bill will know why. Albert Gallatin, that's the year that construction was obligated. One of the largest projects we've had in MPO, recent MPO history. So that's why 2018 looks like that. And then I'll say that we have about 25 million to spend each year. And so obviously we've had lots of conversations about project delivery and our unobligated balance. That is still an issue, even when we're looking at our end of year balance. 23, it looks a little bit higher than it probably should be. A lot of that is due to the CRISA, the COVID relief funding that we had to obligate, or it was going to be rescinded. So that's about 7 million of our 14 million. It's about half of our total suballocated obligations over the course of the year. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then just as a just informational, this is how the listing is organized. So we've just included this in the slides if you have any questions about each of the fields. So it'll show you by county, by fiscal year. Obviously, it will only be in fiscal year 2023. The date obligated, the TIP ID, the TDOT PIN number, the federal project number, termini, the project name as it's listed in the tip, the project type, the phase, funding type, as well as the amount of federal funds that were obligated and the total funds that are still in the tip. So this is just an informational item. Look through over the next month or so. If you have any comments and any suggestions or edits, please send them to us. We will make those changes.
Questions for Daniel?
I asked about the question, project in Sumner County. It's a bridge replacement project. It's number 3 on the list. First page of the list, and it is a bridge replacement on Highway 31E over East Fork of Station Camp Creek. There's a paired project for a replacement of a bridge on the West Fork that I thought was supposed to be happening at the same time, but I didn't see that in the listing.
So that is part of the TDOT grouping. We can look into, I can look into see if we're missing another obligation for the West Fork Bridge.
Okay.
And we can get with local programs to see if it's just something we missed or if it just didn't obligate, but I'll get back to you on that one.
On the descriptions that are used, I couldn't really figure out what was going on. I know that some of these are probably been on this list for a while, but in the middle of page 2, here's a project in Davidson County, State Route 155. Couldn't figure out where SR1, which is Mercer Road at Nashville and Eastern Railroad underpass is. I don't know that there is a Nashville and Eastern underpass. There's a grade level crossing that road. Maybe that's supposed to be CSX road.
It might be CSX. We can look into that as well. That's another one of the TDOT groupings.
I actually looked at each one of these. Not real too closely, but some of interest. So.
We can try and clarify that just to confirm that it's the right description.
And that is it. And I also want to clarify, and I think it's pretty clear that the last column, the total funds in the TIP are the total funds in that box.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
that pops up quite a bit. I don't know if that's confusing or not, but it's the total TIP in that classification or that that project, not project number, but the fund source.
Right. So I would say that the federal funds is the more important field, showing exactly how the amount of federal funds that were obligated on that line item. I would probably pay more attention to that than on the total funds too.
Now, if there were other funds that were allocated to a particular project, is it worth reporting that they may not be obligated?
As in, like, there might be unobligated funds on a specific project?
Well, if the funds from a different type or source are allocated.
Oh, if a project has
but they're not
multiple
obligated at
sources.
this time, yeah.
I would direct you to the TIP app to see, because we track obligations within our TIP database. And so it'll show you exactly which programmed lines have not been obligated, because you can see the obligations on the bottom of the page. I would direct you to there to answer that question. Does that make sense?
Just wondered if that's an inhibitor to having a project move forward, if only certain types of funds are being obligated while others are being curtailed or held back.
I see what you're saying. It's tied to the phase. So if the phase has multiple funding sources on it, they'll obligate at the same time if the phase is ready to obligate.
Any other questions for Daniel? Bill, you good?
I think so.
All right, well,
I
hearing no
have
more.
time, I'll peruse through that sometime.
Yeah, you've got time. So if you want to make a list of edits, you're welcome to send that to us.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I don't think there's any more questions. Moving on to informational item B, safety performance measure targets. I'll turn it over to Ashley Glasscock, GNRC Senior Research Analyst for the staff presentation.
Hey, everybody, I'm Ashley Glasscock, your favorite safety person. This is to start off the presentation. We are only covering data that goes from January of this year to October 16th of this year. We had to find some kind of cutoff date just to give you an update on how we are doing in terms of our targets. So just keep that in mind as we go through the numbers, that these aren't yet final. We just want you to have these kind of in the back of your mind for the next little bit. If you move to the next slide. This chart just shows you the previous regional targets. I won't cover every bit of it. It's just to remind you of what the baseline was when we set 2023 targets, what that 1-year target was, what that resulting federal highway defined target, and then to remind you of what our 2045 goal is. If you go to the next slide, I'll go through more of these in detail in these charts. So the chart you're looking at now is looking at fatalities. So the gray line is showing you historic fatalities as they've trended over time. And it shows you the baseline, like I said, that we used to set this year's target. It shows you that the 2023 target was 189 fatalities. That's what we wanted to keep it below. And already currently month to date, we are at 205 fatalities. If you go to the next slide. Serious injuries, same similar format, historic data, baseline. Our 2023 target was to keep serious injuries under 1,297 in order to keep us on trend to get us to that 1,039 by 2045. Already month to date, we're at 1,031, so just slightly under. And if you go to the next slide, you see non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries. Again, similar format. We're trying to stay on trend to get us to that 138 by 2045. The target for this year was 172, and currently month to date, we're already at 159. To the next slide. This table is more of a report card, kind of showing you guys where we're already at with 2 months left of the year. For fatality rate and serious injury rate, you won't see a current month to date or current target status. Unfortunately, we don't have EMT data at a month-to-month basis, so those are still tentative. But you can see the baseline trend for number of fatalities is increasing, as well as the fatality rate is expected to increase. The 2023 target was 189. Like I mentioned before, we're already at 205. So we've already missed our target for fatalities by 16 people, and we still have 2.5 months left to go. Fatality rate, the baseline trend is trending upwards. We had that target set at 0.82, and we're not able to really determine current target status. But if I had to infer, we're probably going to miss that one as well. Number of serious injuries, the baseline trend is trending downward. We had that target set at 1,297. We're currently at that 1,031. So we are under our target status by 266 serious injuries. But like I mentioned before, the year's not over with. Similar story for serious injury rate. The baseline is trending downward, but we're not able to determine current target status. And then the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, the baseline trend is trending downward. We had that target set of 172. We already month to date, we're at 159, and we are under our target with 13 non-motorist fatalities and serious injuries with the rest of the year left to go. When we look at the demographics of the people that make up those crashes that have already occurred month to date, we can look at elderly drivers. So that's drivers themselves that are ages 65 and older. We've already had 22 elderly drivers killed so far this year. That's actually down from last year. We had 86 seriously injured, which is up from last year, and then about 8,100 elderly drivers involved in a crash. You go to the next slide. We looked at school-age children, so ages 5 to 18. We've had 17 fatalities so far this year in that age group, is increasing from last year. We've had about 116 serious injuries, which is down from last year, and about 12,344 school-aged people that have been involved in a crash so far this year. To the next slide. Then we looked at young drivers, so ages 18 to 24. We've had 32 young drivers killed so far this year. That's down from last year. We've had 144 seriously injured, and we had about 13,000 young drivers involved in a crash. And then when we want to shift over to driving behavior. So the next few slides are going to cover, so for example, speeding. We've had 40 fatalities of someone in a speeding related crash. So that doesn't necessarily mean the person that was speeding was killed, just that there was speeding involved in the accident. Which is up from last year. We had 131 people seriously injured, which is up from last year. And we've also had 3,775 people involved in a speeding related crash. Then when we look at drinking and driving, We had 54 fatalities, which is an increase over last year, 152 serious injuries, down from last year, and 3,411 people involved in a drinking and driving related accident. And then not wearing a seatbelt. This one's probably the most daunting because easily preventable, but we have 50 fatalities, which was down from last year, 130 seriously injured, and then 1,160 people unbelted in a crash. And then the last one's a new one that we've had Department of Safety look into. If you go to the next slide. Looking at unlicensed drivers, I've sat in a lot of the fatal crash review meetings with Metro Nashville, and this seems to be a recurring problem, at least for Davidson County, that unlicensed drivers seem to be a big problem. And so we looked at this category as well. And there's 54 fatalities of an unlicensed driver, 292 seriously injured, and 18,590 people that were unlicensed in a car crash. Next slide. Looking at the location and the geographic distribution of crashes. So this is looking at the new baseline, the 2018-2022. You can see it follows a similar trend as every other year, that most of our crashes are occurring in urban centers and along state routes, principal arterials, interstates, and those sorts of places. And then some data resources we have available. We do have a month-to-date crash tracking dashboard that is updated at the end of every single month that lets you sort by county, by mode, and by severity of crash, and lets you look at them as compared to previous years month-to-date. And we are currently working on individual county level crash profiles, as well as an interactive dashboard of that new baseline data coming out here in the next month or so.
So the reason we're showing this to you today is an informational item just to get you thinking about it before we end the year. We'll be giving you another presentation in January when you'll be asked to endorse the regional targets as well as endorse for TPP adoption in January. But as you know, we are the only MPO in the state that sets regional targets and doesn't adopt the states. And so this is just informational to get you thinking about sort of the trends that we're seeing and the results of the targets that you all have said and that the board has said.
Can you go back to the map? If you look at it, it appears that I-24 corridor and a surrounding area is, I guess, more or less a hot spot for traffic generated data. And I wonder, like, if you look at like the intersection of 840 and 65, I know there's been ongoing construction there for some time. That is there, and I stand to be corrected, but is there any correlation between that we can pick out where construction is slowing traffic down? That would, I guess, explain a little bit of the stark difference in how big the plot looks on the I-24 corridor versus the I-65 corridor, the I-40 corridor on the south side of town.
So you're asking if a temporary construction zone could be a contributing factor
A contributing factor to actually benefit fatalities because it's slowing traffic down.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if that's a analysis that we
I think
do.
you're correct with the pendulum or spectrum of lowering speed lowers your chance of a fatality, but it probably increases your chance of a crash. There's more rear ends, there's more property damage only crashes, but there's going to be less fatalities, less serious injury just due to the speed.
And what does this plot of crashes show? All crashes?
All crashes, yeah.
All crashes, and I believe this one's normalized to the county, right?
It is normalized to the county.
So each county has
On scale.
its own scale.
I mean, if you look at that map, you would say we need to be focusing on the I-24.
That's volume related.
Yeah.
Hey, is there a correlation between unlicensed drivers and DUIs, or have y'all looked at that kind of?
We're actually working with Department of Safety to start looking at those cross references to see if it's unlicensed drivers. Because from anecdotally speaking, that seems to be the issue. That you hear a lot of the police officers noting that it's usually unlicensed drivers, repeat offenders, drinking and driving, multiple. Let's just be, we're looking into the cross between them.
I know you mentioned drinking and driving. Is there a way to track distracted driving as a cause?
We keep looking into that, and it's really difficult for police officers to determine if it was distracted driving, because unless that phone was actively in their hand at the time, or they're able to get a subpoena or things to look into the phone, it's hard to determine if it was. Most of them will tell you yes, a lot of their crashes are distracted driving, but they're very severely underreported. It's really hard to charge someone with that.
A situation of multiple variables that are causing a crash, it may be drinking and driving and speed. Someone's gonna have to make a decision what they figure is the majority reason as to why that crash occurred.
And that's usually like up to the police officer will usually determine the reason, the fault that would cause the crash. But a lot of times, multiple instances are listed on the crash report. So it's kind of hard to determine if it was speeding or the drinking and driving led him to want to speed and then cause the crash. But it's also hard to determine a lot of times if the person drinking and driving wasn't the speeder, but the other person was speeding. And happened
Yeah,
a lot.
on the police reports, they don't have leading cause because they don't want to point blame on the crash report necessarily.
Yeah.
But on the crash report, they will have first harmful event. So that's like the first thing that the vehicle hits. Which isn't always the cause, but it lets you know what they hit. If they hit a car and then a telephone pole, or if they hit a telephone pole and then a ditch or whatever.
I think the key takeaway is probably that a lot of these crashes are complex and include a lot of risk factors from different elements, whether it's built environment or driver behavior related. And I think that's what makes the safety issue important, because it's such a complex issue that requires a lot of analysis. You can't just say like, oh, it's just because of unbelted, it's just because of this or that. There's a lot of compounding risk factors that contribute to a crash.
One piece of data that we're missing from the crash reports with all these, all the different tools that we have now. And I like to say that we all have access now to the Astro Safety Wear. If you have access to that, it's a great source of the common data, because I've spoken about this before in the past. It's hard. It can be hard. I'm gonna say it's not difficult for everybody, but it has been for some of us to get access to the actual Titan database to see the reports, because it's a law enforcement database. You can get access to it, but you have to have permission through your local law enforcement, and they're not always keen to give that to other folks. It's kind of they protect their own silo. But one of the key missing points when we start aggregating this data into different, like in y'all's dashboard or in the Astro Safety Wear, is the component that the officer actually put the commentary in there. That's usually very helpful in helping determine the true cause of the accident, because they'll put their own commentary in there, and none of the shared databases we have that piece of data in there. That's something just to be thinking about. If there's a way to provide that common piece of data, that when you start looking at accidents in a specific area or corridor, it's very helpful to have that police officer's commentary. May not always be right, but at least it gives you an idea better of what happened in that area. So they may put that first contributing factor, the first harmful event may be drinking and driving, but it may really be speeding. It's hard to tell without having that commentary in there.
Can y'all produce a plot that just shows fatalities and serious injuries?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Most of the time, we try to combine them to be severe crashes, just because fatalities are so isolated and where they typically will occur. But you can look at severity and kind of get an idea for where it becomes more dangerous areas. But yeah, we can definitely do that.
One additional thing, if we're going to be asked to endorse the safety targets again, since we've been doing this 2 or 3 years now, can we see what we have endorsed in the past and where we actually ended up? I think that would be very good to have when we're endorsing again this next time.
We can definitely do that.
And I'll echo Jonathan's comment. AstroWare is a very helpful tool that TDOT has provided to us. I think that everybody here should have access. But Jeff Murphy is the safety coordinator at TDOT that will give you access if you haven't used the platform before. So I can send that out again in our follow-up email in case anybody doesn't have access to that tool.
The only tough part is getting your route designation ID. Sometimes it's not always so easy. You can't just put in a route name all the time.
Transit safety targets as part of this?
Yes, it's a separate activity, if that makes sense.
It will be in conjunction with the adoption of safety
We've
targets.
traditionally done that as a separate activity, yes, because they're completely different.
Is there a timeline?
I don't know if I think those are two-year targets.
We looked at those as part of the RTP cycle, so I'm not sure
I don't
when
think
they
that's an
repeat.
annual. I'll double check.
Just look because
Thank you for reminding me, but I don't think that's an annual target that we have to endorse.
Discussion, any other questions for staff? All right, moving on to discussion item C. Our informational item C, Metro Nashville Multimodal Transportation Analysis Update. Melissa Hancock, NDOT Transportation Engineer.
Melissa Hancock, I'm a transportation engineer at NDOT, and I'm project manager of the traffic impact study to multimodal transportation analysis guideline update. And I'm here with my colleague Ian.
Yeah, hi everyone, Ian Woods. I'm with Arcadis, I've been embedded at NDOT for 2 years.
As the slides pop up, we can start. We started this project last October, and we just released the final guidelines at the beginning of October. So over the course of the year, we completed this project and are moving on to next steps, which we'll get into. I'm really excited to share this all with you all.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Okay. So this is just the agenda for our presentation. We're going to breeze through the first three just so we can get into the aspects of the multimodal transportation analysis that we're implementing. So you can go ahead. So just as background, this is the development review process, which I'm sure many of you are aware of. The Transportation Impact Study, TIS, is a major role in this process and is usually done at the beginning. Go ahead. And so these are the aspects of a TIS. We have the scoping process, the traffic analysis that occurs, and then the mitigation measures that are done for the development. And so our previous challenges with the traffic impact study guideline were that it was created in 2004 and not updated. It was very vehicle focused. There was no mention of safety in the guideline. So no guidance for implementing safety analysis into the studies that were done. It wasn't in alignment with the code or other transportation plans in Metro. And then we had delayed decision-making and inconsistent outcomes of each transportation impact study that occurred, which leads us to our project goals. Next slide. So we wanted to align with Metro Nashville policies and plans. We wanted to incorporate the industry's best practices and provide a comprehensive assessment of the entire transportation network. And so the clear update you can see here is that we changed the title from Traffic Impact Study to Multimodal Transportation Analysis, MMTA. And then, so these are the key aspects of our project. We completed a best practice review, existing conditions and policy assessment. We updated the Metro Code, and then we prepared the guideline itself and implemented it. And so just going to breeze over this a little bit since in sake of time, but we do have the full document that goes over best practices review and the existing conditions on our project webpage, which is on nashville.gov. And we can share that link with you to send out at the end. But we emphasized our focus on multimodal and safety analysis. We looked at several cities, but those four listed there were the key ones we looked at. They had really good multimodal and safety analysis in their guidelines. And then something we came across was between different cities, there were several different legal contexts in terms of the transportation impact studies, between impact fees or creating rational nexus with mitigation measures. And then, sorry, really quick. And then for the existing conditions, we also had numerous stakeholder meetings with lots of different stakeholders. That list grew and grew over the course of our project and got lots of good feedback from that. And then just quickly, the things we changed in the code were the title. We added scoping clarifications into the code. We adjusted the study descriptions to include multimodal and safety analysis. We added timeline definitions, and then we just referenced another part of the code in the implementation section of the guideline. And so I'm going to pass it over to Ian to go over this next section of what we added into the guideline.
So this was shown before, but just as a reminder, this is the kind of traditional traffic impact study structure that a lot of us are probably familiar with. And then in the next slide, we use it to compare it with the updated MMTA structure. And so we keep a lot of the same aspects, but in bold, you'll see a lot of the features that were added to create a more comprehensive review. And we're going to go over some of the highlights of these additions in the next few slides. So starting with the level of traffic stress analysis that we've incorporated with the MMTA update. Level of traffic stress is a methodology that's been adopted by state DOTs, municipalities over the last decade or so. It's a classification system for pedestrian and bicycle facilities in a transportation network. And that classification system is broken down into your segments and your intersections. It's based on a 1 through 4 rating scale for those facilities, where a level of traffic stress 1 rating would be a very low stress segment or intersection, and a level of traffic stress 4 rating would be a very high stress facility. And so the good thing about level of traffic stress is that it goes a step further than just asking what facility is out there, what type of facility is out there, such as a sidewalk or a bike lane, and actually what's the experience of the end user who's actually on that sidewalk or using that bike lane. The final deliverable that's going to be included in the report is a level of traffic stress map for pedestrian and bicycle facilities, which shows those ratings assigned to the segments and the intersections. And so how does an applicant conduct this level of traffic stress analysis? So through the best practice review that Melissa touched on, we've adapted flowcharts for bicycle level of traffic stress and pedestrian level of traffic stress. The flowcharts use easily verifiable characteristics of the transportation network to differentiate your level of traffic stress 1 from 2, from 3, from 4. And so this is things like, what's the speed limit of the road? How many travel lanes are there? In some cases, what's the traffic volume? If there is a facility, so if there's a sidewalk or a bike lane, what's the width of that facility? And is there a buffer? We all know that if we're walking along a sidewalk that's 6 feet, that experience is very different if the cars going by you are going 45 miles an hour versus 25 miles an hour. And so that's really the aim of incorporating level of traffic stress into these new impact studies. All the flowcharts are included in the appendix of the guideline, which is on the Nashville.gov website. So moving on to some of the transit requirements we've incorporated. Previously, it was more of an informal process looking at transit. We've done some work to formalize that. So we look at transit stops in the defined study area around a new development. So we look at transit stop type. Is it just a sign? Is it a bench, shelter, things like that? Transit stop design, transit stop spacing. But something we've focused on with this update is also transit stop access. So actually taking the pedestrian path of travel from the new development to the transit stops in the study area and asking if there is safe and efficient access to those transit stops, because from NDOT's perspective, a transit stop can have a really good design, but if there isn't safe and efficient access to that transit stop, then the benefits of that design are going to be significantly impacted, which is why we're focusing also on transit access.
Out of curiosity, does it look at the pair? Because usually when you've got, okay.
Yeah, so moving on to safety analysis. So we actually spoke a little bit about AASHTO safety before. If you think in the scoping part of the impact study process, so at the very beginning, NDOT will now pull 5 years of crash data from AASHTO safety's database and provide that to the applicant with the approved scoping form. So that data includes things like crash severity, the location of the crashes, some of the big contributing factors like we spoke about, and who was involved. So with that data, the applicant will be able to take it and then transform it into really insightful tables and really insightful visuals in the report. So things like on the right here, you can summarize where all the pedestrian crashes have happened in the study area. I think taking a step back, I think an impact study that comes in with a new development is a really good opportunity to take a really localized look at a few segments and a few intersections. And so incorporating this safety analysis, we think will really uncover some important trends that can be addressed in the recommendation section of the entire process, which Melissa will touch on now.
So tying all of that data and analysis that we're going to have in these studies together to show what the deficiencies are in the transportation network, what safety hazards there may be, and then finding the rational nexus between the development impacts and those deficiencies. This is really important for Nashville, Davidson County, since we do not have impact fees. We have to have developers provide their recommendations for improvements to mitigate their impacts on this system. So these aren't all of the rational nexus items, but these are just some of the higher key ones that we kind of touch on in this presentation. Mode split, parking that's provided by the development, the levels of traffic stress, safety hazards, community needs and demographics, and then existing plan compliance. And so something that we didn't have before in traffic impact studies was with the lack of study of the entire network, we would base everything off of vehicle level of service. So we didn't have a rational nexus for asking for anything other than like a traffic signal or turn lane. So now we'll be able to provide for the entire network whatever's needed in the study area related to the development itself. And so looking forward to our next steps, we are currently working on a GIS map layer to geolocate the MMTAs and backlog the traffic impact studies to a reasonable years back. And then also track the key data from those studies and then the improvements and mitigations as it existed and exists now until we get this up and running. All of the traffic impact studies and MMTAs are just on a cloud folder on NDOT's website on our shared cloud. So finding improvements, right now we have lots of overlap between different developments that may have happened 2 or 3 years ago and now all asking for the same thing. And then some developments get out of doing their improvements because they're both conditioned the same thing. So this should help us delineate that and make sure that there isn't overlap and that meaningful improvements are being implemented across the board and it's more fair. And then just the gray along the bottom is some additional opportunities we're looking at in the future beyond the tracking of the data, the mitigation, and where the MMTAs and TISs are, and just what we can do next. And so just to close out on our lessons learned, we found that one of the key things was constantly engaging with stakeholders, constantly growing that list of stakeholders, and getting very valuable feedback helped shape what this MMTA guideline ended up being. And then another key thing was we found that the way the data is presented in the studies is really important. All of the traffic impact studies, if you look at them, they're mostly just paragraphs and paragraphs of words. And so you have to read through really detailed descriptions and different wording that might not be very recognizable to just a community member who isn't familiar with traffic impact studies. So now what we have are visual representations of the data and clearly represented in the study, like you saw on the side with the safety analysis, like the pedestrian safety map is very valuable to look at as opposed to just a map of dots everywhere. So we're trying to make it so it's more visually easily accessible to anyone. And so now is the time for questions. Thank you for listening.
So, of course, so we're currently scoping a comprehensive transportation plan. But that's not going to give us immediate results. Would you think this would be more short-term developer, once we get it complete, developer sees this and kind of we use these metrics to see what we really need versus a long-term plan? Not saying we don't need the long-term plan, but would you come speak to our Transportation Advisory Committee.
Yeah, so an interim solution is really, would be beneficial. During this process, we had an interim bulletin that we created just to fill the time gap between what the TIS guidelines showed and what this new guideline was. And it just kind of, it wasn't on this scale, but since the scale is available, it could be really beneficial to you all or whoever is interested to follow the metric in the meantime.
I mean, a couple people ready to get models, like actually spend money on modeling, and I'm trying to steer away from that. So
Okay.
let me reach out to you.
Yeah, go.
I think you need both. I think you need your long range plan as well as this is a really good guidance tool for your development side of the house. You know,
But I don't think we need tools that GNRC has in larger cities with 15,000 people.
well, I'm not going to disagree with that, but I do think from this perspective, it's very helpful. So one of the challenges that we had is we were actually taken to court and sued over our sidewalk ordinance, and we lost in a court of law, and it's going to affect all of us on that because they cited a case out of Texas. This actually allows us to build the nexus of the importance of why we would require a sidewalk to be built if walkability is one of the issues that they're driving at and creating in their development piece. So I think, you know, the long range plan is kind of getting what you should consider as far as what your arterial and collector roads should look like. And then you can, and what elements you apply to it. This could be directly tied to the development and how you can build those nexus to a regional component, a regional transit component, to walkability, to why you want bicycle, you know, lanes and all of that. It just helps you define that so that the development industry can't just roll over and say, no, we're only focusing on this.
Yeah, we need to update it. I mean, we have a comp plan we just recently in 2019. They were looking at larger scale traffic.
We have one too, and we found that we have not been very successful with staying up with that. So
I'm reaching out to you.
this kind of allows us to get to the nitty gritty of it so that we can look at a little bit more of an area than just a piece of property. It allows for us to have a larger conversation about this project, especially if it's a mixed use with some with density, the effect it's going to have not just on that particular piece of property, but the area around it and how that connectivity should happen with the other properties there.
I suspect that a lot of the consultants that produce these TISs are not familiar with some of these analyses. I'm wondering if you see that as a challenge and to get quality analysis back and maybe a learning kind of process
Right.
as they start doing them.
Yes, especially for some of the smaller firms around town. Some of the larger ones that are more regionally and nationally, globally based are more familiar with some of these concepts, but it will be a learning curve most likely, and we'll kind of see how that goes as time goes on. We haven't received any MMTAs yet, so that will be interesting to see, but hopefully our guidance and the full guidelines will help them, figure out. We're here to answer the questions and meet with them if they need. We've already met with a couple of firms to go over all their questions. So, yeah, hopefully it goes well.
It's been an interesting conversation with the development community.
It always is.
Yeah.
I can see that a lot of thought has gone into this and really helps to force, because we're all seeing the same thing from developers. It's the same developers going to all of our cities.
Yes.
I think it's seeing something like this is really good to see and help force the developer to think more of a good steward of the community versus how do we just come in and make a quick buck and leave and get out of here and think about our community. So you're forcing them to look at all those things that make a community a good, desirable community.
Plus, if you have a developer that's coming in and just looking to get one thing done and then flipping,
Yes.
this doesn't, it's not that they can't do that. It's just, this is allowing you to build all of that into it so that when it's flipped, those requirements go with it.
Because they have an uncanny ability to get out of things.
Uncanny ability.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, that doesn't really affect us. It's not us. We're the last ones in. Why should we pay for it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is good. It's very good to see that you're going after looking at a more holistic approach here. And I think honestly, to piggyback on that comment, you may have to turn that into more of a seminar for a lot of communities, I think, that'll be interested in this.
Also setting it up so that the data we get, she hit on this, but is more live and more usable so that developers can kind of share the data that come in from the various studies.
Okay, good.
And then we can also use that to support long-range planning too. Those are inputs that we may not otherwise have. And getting them all in a collective kind of digital space that we can then use for that type of analysis will be very helpful.
Yeah, I heard one interesting thing was trying to keep up with on GIS with more of that live data and what each individual developer, the improvements they're supposed to do. I think we all see that too is, well, we don't need to do that improvement because the development X over here, they're already doing that. So we don't need to do that. And all of a sudden it gets lost by both developers, or developer X changes their mind about what they wanted to do, and the improvement never gets made. So I think that's good to see that's going to be kept up with on a more live way.
What kind of thresholds do you have for requiring something like this? Like how big of, is there a trigger as far as like the size of development, that kind of thing?
So the thresholds, we actually didn't change thresholds from what they previously were, which were set in 2017. But the thresholds are 75 residential units or above, 100 plus peak hour trips. And then there's some other ones that are a little more like specific, but it's based off of peak hour trips, daily trips, and then the number of residential units.
Yeah, and I'll add, we've defined 2 levels of study. So in the presentation, you saw a full study area. That's for your bigger developments. For your smaller to medium-sized developments, we have what we call a level 2 study, or sorry, a level 1 study, which was previously called an access study. And that's, you do all the same analysis, but you just do it on the site frontage and the intersections that are actually touching the site. So it's a smaller scope.
And smaller threshold.
Smaller threshold.
Are you all going to take funds in lieu of any improvements or prorate anything or?
Yes. So Davidson doesn't have the ability to apply impact fees. So this gives us an opportunity for if a developer wants to participate in that infrastructure improvement, this gives us the opportunity. We are going to try to, well, I would much rather encourage them to do it and make the improvements as cheaper, quicker, and faster than us doing it. But if there is a reason why, like maybe they're the first one in and not the last one in, and they want to participate through it, there'll be an ability for them to be a participation agreement.
I want to commend NDOT for the vision that they have in implementing these. From a transit perspective, we know this has been a problem for us, and we've usually been left out of that process many times. I haven't been able to tap, because of lack of impact fees. Sometimes, that's the last thing in people's minds. Transit, this is the very bottom if they're even thinking about it. But I think this gives us another tool to be the beneficiaries of some of these improvements when it impacts our ability to provide service, to have safe access to transit. Our riders are always a pedestrian at some point. So that's really important for us, or even as developers ourselves, as we continue to expand our footprint with mobility hubs. You see what I did there?
Thank you, Phil.
It's an ability to take a more comprehensive approach to everything that impacts those developments. So for us, and they're not kidding. I mean, they really are involved a lot of stakeholders, us being one of them, and it's been a great process. So good job. I really, this was really, it's a step in the right direction. So it's a great project.
We did take it to our council and have them codify it. So if you are interested, we're more than happy to share. That's why we wanted to. I've had the pleasure of sitting with some of the elected officials who have said, hey, we'd be interested in this kind of a concept. So that's why we're bringing it here first. And then we're presenting to the, I always get this wrong. Thank you, TPB, on the 15th, but just wanted to make sure y'all had the opportunity to see it first. But we're more than happy to share it out. We feel like this is a solution with some of the challenges we're having from the development community, including the single family home development community, when it comes to getting some improvements that are really necessary in our communities to be happening. So
I heard you mention we currently require improvements. We require traffic impact studies I'm a county, so I deal with a highway department that doesn't like to look at traffic studies a whole lot, but they do have a policy above a certain number of lots. You've got to put in a center turn lane and decel lanes and things of that nature. So, but that's predominantly right at the point of the development. Are you able to use this program and this data that you're collecting on, for instance, pedestrian safety, to affect off-site improvements, if you will, from the developer?
Yes, yeah, as long as we can show, or as long as the study shows that there's a nexus between the development's impacts and an off-site improvement, then we can. If there's a intersection intersections away and it's not really that, there's not like a clear connection made, then maybe.
So an example might be, we talked about transit access, right? Say they draw that pedestrian path of travel, there's some missing length of sidewalk. Before, it might be a bit of a back and forth or an argument about building that sidewalk if it's a block or two away. But we can now show that, okay, this development is projecting that it will create a lot of pedestrian trips. Those pedestrians are going to want to use transit, and it's along the pedestrian path of travel to a transit stop. You then start to have more of a rational nexus to build that sidewalk. So that's the type of thing we've been trying to embed into these studies in lieu of just a blanket impact fee. So.
And then with our traffic demand management program, transportation demand management program that we're working on, we're looking at incentives. So especially when it comes to trying to improve the ridership on the transit side of the house, if a developer comes in and wants to build less parking, which means there's less trips, we would take that and look at what that would mean and then allow the dollars to be spent for the transit side of improvements, because that's where the focus would be. So this really gives us a chance to look at all that analysis and find that nexus and say, we'll take this amount off so you can apply it here using through our transportation demand management policies and incentives. You can take this away, but you're doing this instead.
As part of this, as the city adopted a multimodal level of service standard by area, and to achieve that and implementing it and tying it to the next rational nexus, allowing proportionate fair share agreements, pro rata agreements to achieve.
We have, WeGo actually has an in-motion plan of their transit operations and what it looks like. So we do follow the WeGo plan, the in-motion, plan when it comes to a transit component. We're getting ready in partnership with WeGo as well as with our planning department to kick off a multimodal study, sort of like your long-range plan. We really do not have a long-range plan of how we want to see Nashville grow and Davidson County grow. So we're kicking that off here beginning of the new year, where we're going to dive into that a little bit more and take all of the plans that we have in consideration, including what we have in Nashville Next. Nashville Next is where we actually have our collectors, arterial collectors and street set, plan set. So we are trying, and it doesn't fit with the land use right now because we've grown so quickly. So we're going to try to clean that up, understand it. Where transit, we want to add growth. Where we want to see transit actually have that growth opportunity, maybe that needs to change within that and the long range plan that we would bring forward to the MPO as well, so that it's all reflective. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on that, but give us a year and we'll be caught up.
We did consider the idea of the multimodal level of service. That's part of the ITE. What is it called? The guideline, I guess it's traffic.
Yeah.
ITE has a recent document from the last few years that sort of sets up kind of the framework for doing this. And they list several different options.
And we'll get there. We're just not
we
there
don't
yet.
have the long range plan in
Yeah.
place that could give us
We're
that
moving in that direction.
Yeah.
So we follow the in motion now.
This type of projects will save you from that provisions that you had with the court decision, perhaps, and tackle the big guys, I guess.
I think it'd be good to do a follow-up after you get a few of these on the books to kind of see how it looks and how it works in real life. That would be helpful for a lot of communities.
And we don't plan this to be the only document for the next 20 years again. So as we get studies over the next course of the next year and whenever it seems necessary, we'll continue to update as new research comes out and that kind of thing. So we plan for this to continue to grow and improve along the way.
I'll be interested to see, no disrespect to any traffic engineers in the room, but how closely you have to work with the traffic engineer on the other side of the table to say, well, what about this? Or did you look at this? Because I'm not saying that anybody has their thumb on the scales or anything, but I think we all see traffic studies come back in favor of the developer sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'd be very interested to see how you guys engage.
Yeah, every time, yeah. I'm an engineer and I'll still say that it's every time they're taking care of their client.
And I think what I love, I mean, someone had mentioned about putting in a left turn lane or, or center turn lane. This allows if that particular corridor is a corridor that you want to make a pedestrian priority, then it's actually looking at how to unwarranted a left turn lane or a center turn lane so that you're putting the priority of the pedestrian first versus the car. And so that's a little bit of a different, that gets very challenging for the traffic engineers is because we are saying certain circumstances, we're going to prioritize either transit first, or we're going to prioritize the pedestrian first, or even bicycle lanes first, and the car is going to be the last priority. We're not saying it's not a priority. We're just saying we're going to take and look at other modes being a priority ahead of it.
A transit perspective and watching my peers hallway go through reviews with developers, it's very eye-opening and very helpful for a transit user and pedestrian user, because now we can justify we need the crosswalk because you've got to get across the street. You got to come back home. It's one thing to leave to go to work, and then how do I get back to my house, which is across the street? So it's been very eye-opening with those discussions, and we're very happy to see this being implemented.
It was also really driven by, we've done our Vision Zero plan in Nashville, and we've identified our high injury network, and we've identified a lot of those crashes that are leading to very serious injuries, are fatalities, and unfortunately, a lot of our pedestrian deaths are happening at and near transit stops, especially on our arterial roads. So this is really helping to shape the conversation as we are seeing our city get those multi-complexes going to our main corridors, where we can have the discussion about adding in a mid-block crossing or another crossing, pedestrian crossing, because right now, we know that, there are a lot of left turns allowed for cars, but there's no, mid-block crossing for a pedestrian. We expect them to walk down 2 blocks and go across and then come back.
Or across.
Yeah, and that's just, and unfortunately, that's what's happening, and they're dying. So this also adds more of a level to the conversation as we try to get to zero fatalities in our city and county.
Say goodbye to the just generic developer coming in for a subdivision saying, what are you talking about? We did our improvements. We put in a left turn lane.
Yeah, I did that last week.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah, they actually have to put some thought into it now. Yeah. That's the big change for the developers. Hey, you gotta think this time. You can't put your cookie cutter development in here.
Any other questions for staff?
It does.
Friends at NDOT?
I think this is helpful though. I've called different colleagues. We've had a few engineers come in, but they were actually planners. And, the things that I'm telling elected officials, when somebody, another planner says it holds more weight. But we had a planner/engineer tell our elected officials similar to some of the stuff we said in this room. But I think just being engaged with this helps.
We look forward to your regional workshops and seminars.
Well, you have 2 great individuals there.
We're doing a roadshow.
There you go.
I'm with Glenn. I think everybody else would agree. I'd love to have you guys come back, in the coming year to talk about how it's going. I think that'd be awesome.
We're going to have a couple of them that are going to be coming through, I would say, in the next 6 months, probably less than that. But so maybe late spring would probably be a really good time. We'd have one that we would have worked through. I'm thinking of that's getting ready to move. But it also helps shape the conversation when you have a developer who wants to build something with huge density in an area where it is not meant to have growth. And I think we're all experiencing that as well.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you all very much for coming today. I appreciate it. Moving on to item 5, regular reports. We don't have anybody from Federal Highway here Daniel, do you want to do something on their behalf?
Yeah, Federal Highway was not able to be here today, but the one update I did get from Melanie was the Thriving Communities Program is now accepting applications for fiscal year 2023. It provides technical assistance, planning, and capacity building support to teams of community partners that may lack the staffing or technical expertise to scope, fund, and develop infrastructure projects that advance broader community goals. That's a mouthful. But there is no cost to receive the support, but the application is due on November 15th. We'll send out more information and post it on our grants webpage as well. There's also a US DOT navigator. But that's the only update I have from Federal Highway. I'm sure Melanie will, she said she's going to send me something to include in the follow-up, so you'll see that in our email.
They did a presentation on this program at TAPA, and I thought seems like a pretty interesting program for communities that don't have a lot of resources. Moving on, TDOT report, Stacy.
A couple things. I'm still hopeful to get my planning grants off and going again, hopefully by the first of the year. They're obviously very popular. I get emails from folks asking when we're going to do that again almost weekly. So hopefully we can get those going again. You all have seen and heard the information about the statewide partnership. Just, there was 102 projects submitted, and those have been vetted down to 66. About half of those are in the Middle Tennessee region around Nashville. Still the plan is to have something submitted by the end of the year, first of next year. So hopefully more to come on that as well, or their upcoming meetings. That's it. Thank you, Josh.
Stacy, will there be a call for projects on the planning grants this time? Or I know y'all talked about doing an open model basically at some point.
Yeah, we'd like to try to get to do more often calls and kind of spread it out for our staff as well as the communities as well. So that's kind of the goal of doing that. So it'll probably some sort of phased approach where I do a call, try to implement. I got to have the capacity to do about 20 to 30 a year is what we've been done in the past. And so maybe a phased approach where we maybe do half of that, then another half somewhere in the middle of the year, because it'd be good because I could just send somebody apply for it when they email me, ask me when we're going to do it. So hopefully, thank you.
Questions for Stacy? I need to get y'all some help. So Stacy spends more time in Nashville than I do.
Quick reminder too, please use our resources like iTrips and things like that, and give us feedback if there's not enough project information on there. I know Bill mentioned some things earlier, so I'd like to know if there's some things missing or if it's just not as current enough as what you all.
There are several dates that are out of date on there. There's several projects where it'll say that something's supposed to start and it'll be several years old. And obviously it has not started because you can drive it and the road's not been touched.
Right.
But yeah, there are several things that are out of date. I will say that.
Is that using iTrip?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll make that note. Okay. Yeah, thank you, because that's what we want to have, that readily available. I mean, it's for us when we're in meetings and we can't know all the projects.
Yeah, we want to point people to it too when it's like, oh, it's a state. No, it's a state, right? You call TDOT. So, yeah, here's a website.
A couple of databases that are trying to communicate with each other, and one of them's getting transferred into another one, and so maybe that's it. But I'll make the note.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Else anything for TDOT? All right, move on to item C, Chair's report. I don't have anything other than the folks that are on the bylaws subcommittee working group. Y'all got an email from Daniel. We're going to meet after this meeting. It won't be too long. I'm hungry and ready to eat lunch. But we'll meet after this meeting. Next item is staff report. Daniel.
All right, I'll be quick in the interest of time. Two things. Our carbon reduction program phase 2 application is due on November 30th. I know many of you have submitted applications. Thank you for that. But just as a reminder, it's due on November 30th. So please submit if you are in need of funds. And the staff report, or the TIP status report in your packet, which is the very end of your packet. I won't go through it since you've seen it many times, but this is representative of the end of the fiscal year. And so all of the information I presented on in terms of obligations is included in this. There's a little bit more detailed information, so please look through that and let us know if you have any comments or suggestions. But look for the annual obligation report. It will include a lot of what you see in this TIP status report as well. That's all I've got for staff report.
Thank you, Nate. Is there any additional business to come before this body?
Going to mention that I'm going to be retiring here soon, so there will be a position available, a couple of positions actually, in the city of Gallatin, if anybody's interested. We did recently hire Charlie Prairie, who was the representative of Millersville on this committee, and so he's a planner, on our staff now. And so if you're interested in the Gallatin position, you might want to give me a call. I'll give you some information about what it entails. And I don't know if I'll be here next month or not, or certainly probably not in January. It's been a pleasure to serve on this committee, and I know I've been a stickler or thorn in some sides, but that's what it takes sometimes. And that doesn't mean my role ends as far as being a thorn in somebody's side. So encourage you to always question authority, because authority is not where it's at. So
I personally think we need to have some kind of like a stickler emeritus position or something.
Somebody's got to take over Bill's.
Like there's a placard that just stays there,
I have an idea. You can get a photograph of me and put it on the wall. Darts, people walking in, start the meeting.
And I will say, Bill, being next to you in Hendersonville, you've done a great job. And, there's been a lot of development in Gallatin, and your hand is on that, on the quality of it. And, they've been blessed by your presence there. So your detail and attention to planning and high quality planning, you can see it in the development that's happened in the community. So I appreciate that.
And I'll echo those thoughts from the GNRC's perspective. Bill serves on our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee as well, and has been involved in pretty much all of our efforts, at least in the 4 years I've been here. So we appreciate everything you've done, and again, your attention to detail, even if it's grammar notes in the minutes.
I work for the county and I'm not allowed to say anything nice about Gallatin, but Bill is a great guy, and he's going to be very much missed in the county for sure, but definitely here too. So thank you for everything, Bill. All right. Well, that's all we have, I believe, unless anybody else has anything. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, I got a motion and a second.
Please leave your nameplates on the table.
Or she'll come find you.
Oh, I know you will. That's why I said it.
No, it's great. I'm watching.
Oh, that's right.
What more? Thanks today than ever.